Hello and welcome to our Wisconsin Badgers podcast from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. This is where we refuse to bleeping lose. My name is JR Radcliffe. I am joined by John Steppe. We have a name for this podcast, and I'm going to get to that. But today, I wouldn't say this is an emergency podcast because it wasn't like in the immediate aftermath of the Wisconsin volleyball team winning on a Sunday night to advance to the Final Four, shocking Texas, playing extremely well and winning in 4 sets. John Steppe, you were in Austin. You're about to get back on an airplane, head to Kansas City, where the Final Four gets underway Thursday. It'll be the Badgers against Kentucky, the number 2 team in the country. Super interesting Final Four because the number 1 team in the country isn't there. We got to talk about all of this, John Steppe. So first of all, welcome back. How
Thank you.
do you have your bearings? Because you are about to be airborne again for the second time in 36 hours?
Yes. So I think it's going to be the difference between the time that I landed at Madison yesterday and departing today is I think 25 hours.
Incredible.
So I walked up to my apartment and I was like, okay, this is my apartment, right? So
yes.
But all very fun storylines to be covering over the last week and coming up ahead in Kansas City.
Yeah, for sure. Badgers about to have their send off as we record this. I basically led us into a mistake on the last podcast because I basically implied, and I wasn't, to be clear, not just implying it, I was thinking it. The Badgers are going to lose at the regional level. They're facing 2 teams that are ranked ahead of them, as good as Wisconsin has been. Yes, as John Steppe said, they're playing their best volleyball in November and into December. But I thought it was a good story. They did a good job. They were going to meet their maker in Austin against the Texas Longhorns, if not Stanford, in the Sweet 16. So we talked about, well, how will this season be remembered, basically? And now we're idiots because it's going to be remembered for something completely different. And now I feel like we have to go backwards and sort of introduce people who are just now checking in to the Wisconsin volleyball team, where this sort of came from, who their star players are, even though a couple of names I think are probably a little more well-known now. First of all, John Steppe. Terrace View. That's the name we're going to go with for this podcast. We've got to fix the artwork and, gussy it up a little bit. But Terrace View, do you, John Steppe, have any personal relationship with the Monona Terrace in Madison, Wisconsin?
I have not yet. So I started this job in July, moved into my apartment in August, had fall camp for football, and then have been in full season mode. So I feel like there's this massive Madison to-do list for me. Once I actually have time that's not 3 sports going on at one time.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to having terrace experiences.
Well, now is not the time. It's freezing. Yeah. Whether you are anywhere near Mendota or Monona, just steer clear for now. But a cool spot for Madisonians and those who follow the Wisconsin Badgers. So Terrace View is what we're going with. And that is now the name of this podcast. Let's get to know the Wisconsin volleyball team. We're going to talk about these matches themselves against Stanford and Texas. I mean, there were 4-set wins. I don't. There isn't, in my mind, a lot to say other than Wisconsin really, really showed up. But I just kind of want to. Let's start with the origin story of where this team came from. They don't have a lot of familiar names for those who followed the team last year. We have talked a little bit about the setter Charlie Fuerbringer, who was a freshman last year. She is one of the best setters in the country. I know the Wisconsin players will say she's the best setter in the country. I don't think that's an unfair thing to say. I mean, Nebraska has a really good one who's a finalist for National Player of the Year. But with her, Carter Booth, another player, that was the reference we made at the outset. She had a very endearing profanity-laced moment on ESPN following their win over Texas. She was here last year. This is her 3rd year in the program. But after that, it's a lot of new names. It's a lot of people that we're not going to know. So I know when you first got here, you just kind of described what a frenzy it was. Maybe, I don't even know if you were here for how this roster got built. Can you kind of go through what you remember, what you know about when this team was sort of coming together? If it felt like it had the markings of one of those great Wisconsin teams. I imagine it's kind of hard to get a finger on the pulse here because they were, Mimi Colyer coming from Oregon and Grace Lopez, who hasn't played, coming from Miami. They were a lot of transfers and newcomers, and I guess it wasn't clear to me what they had here.
Yeah, I think there's maybe obviously internally within the program, this is always what the expectation is for them. But I think externally is maybe a little bit harder to predict what exactly this team was going to be. It wasn't like there was, Mimi Colyer already was a second team All-American before she got to Wisconsin. So I think everybody knew that she was going to be at least a very good player. I think that, but you didn't know whether, okay, is she going to be very good or is she going to be exceptional, elite in that really special group of great Badger athletes? And we're finding out that it really is the latter in terms of her being, one of the other 4 finalists for ABCA National Player of the Year. We'll find that out on Friday, who the winner is. And all 4 finalists, that's a really stacked field there. But, so to even be a finalist really says a lot in terms of what Mimi has been able to do. But yeah, there is a little more uncertainty of how this team was going to mesh together. But everybody that they brought in also is really talented. Wisconsin hasn't really had a quote unquote bad recruiting class. They brought in a really talented freshman class. They brought in, obviously Mimi gets a lot of the attention, but, also somebody like Allie Andrew coming in from Baylor. You mentioned Grace Lopez, coming in from Miami and then getting hurt. So, that's somebody that we haven't really talked about. But Grace Egan from Ohio State.
That's right.
The way that Grace Egan has filled that, void at right side hitter has been really impressive. So, that's something that we probably haven't necessarily talked enough about. But they had, transfers coming in. They had freshmen coming in. They had somebody like Una that really didn't, she didn't play last year. And then she comes in and has been, especially in this last month of the year, very good. I think it was 15 kills and hitting above 400. I don't have the box score right in front of me against Texas. And if you would have said, that you were going to get those numbers from Una, if you would have told me at the beginning of the year, I'd say, okay, if you're getting that much of a balanced attack where you're able to get that production from her, from Grace, from Mimi, okay, this is a team that, could be playing in Kansas City. So, they took, some challenges earlier in the year. They got swept by Texas. A lot of attack errors in that one that really haunted them. I think that was their lowest hitting percentage of the season, was in that Texas match. And, Charlie Fuerbringer was hurt in the offseason. She's just finally getting back to her normal self when then she suffers the shoulder injury. She misses 9 matches, 10 if you count the match that she got hurt in. So she misses pretty much that entire month of October, give or take. And then she comes back, and this team has been playing with sky-high confidence really ever since. They haven't lost. They're on I think it's a 13-match winning streak, 11-0 since Charlie came back. And, the offense has been, these last 2 wins, the thing that I would say about each of them was just how well-rounded the Badgers were. Yes, Mimi Colyer has been one of the best players in the country, if not the best player in the country this season. But it was equally important this team has been building this momentum, through November into December, that it's not just Mimi. You look at it and the way that Charlie's been able to set up the middles with Carter Booth and Allie Andrew has been outstanding. The way that Grace Egan has contributed in ways also that kind of transcend the box score, where I feel like if you just looked at her stats from the last 4 or 5 matches, it probably doesn't fully do justice for what Grace Egan has done. The numbers that Una has been putting up, this team really was okay, you have a bunch of question marks that could be exclamation points, but you don't know. And now you're starting to see this team really gel. And, again, it's a cliche, but they are really playing their best volleyball at this time of year.
Yeah, Una Vajagic, I think is how I say it. I feel like I'm not doing it quite justice, but an example of a player who was in the program last year, but wasn't a contributor. So she's from Serbia.
You did better than about 95% of PA announcers this season, or play-by-play announcers.
You know, if I go back to the Wisconsin pronunciation guide from her freshman year last year, I got to say the pronunciation they give you it's incorrect. It's a totally different pronunciation as a sophomore on the roster in 2025. So and I had to go back and listen. John Audius, the very good play-by-play announcer, I had to hear him pronounce it. But like last year's team, I mean, Sarah Franklin was a national player of the year. She obviously gone, and players that I think Wisconsin volleyball fans have gotten used to seeing. Anna Schmreck, Yulia Orjol, CC Crawford. They lost some really, really talented players. And outside of Una, Trinity Shad-Saris, who had a nice moment here in these games, and Charlie and Carter, that's it. Like Madison Quest from DSHA is back as well. She was a contributor this year, but I just can't believe they threw this together. I threw it together, of course, in quotes, because this team is one of the haves in college volleyball and do get these top flight transfers. Who really stood out in these matches in particular? Like, who really caught your eye? It felt like such a complete performance in both matches. It felt like everybody was just they were completely in system. Kristen Simon, one of the libero, like the passing was so good. That's the other thing is a lot of these players are going to be back. They're young players who are going to be able to contribute for a long time. But it felt like things were just constantly working. Who do you think was the X factor for Wisconsin that they were able to rise above where they were most of the season, which is a very good team, but maybe not a team that would be seen to win these two matches that they did, to a team that won those matches kind of handily?
Yeah, I think the kind of obvious answer is everyone's going to look at the kills numbers for Mimi, the kills numbers for Una. I'm going to go with just how they've passed. You look at it, and that's something that doesn't, obviously you have digs on the box score, but it really goes beyond that. The way that freshman Kristen Simon has been able to, you mentioned just how in system they were against a very, very good Texas team. I remember watching 2 days earlier, that Texas-Indiana match, and Texas, their physicality at the line was just exceptional against Indiana. And, the way that, Wisconsin can't block everything, but Texas wasn't necessarily hitting at a high percentage because, it was Kristen Simon, it was, Una when she's in the back row. You can kind of go down the list, the way that Wisconsin was able to pass and then set up Charlie Fuerbringer, who has been one of the best setters in the country. And, that's just exactly how you'd want to draw it up. And when it starts so in system, it makes it a lot easier when you're going up against, what was kind of the region of death. Was I think what I told somebody, I don't know if it's on air or off air, but, to have to go up against Stanford and Texas, those are two Final Four caliber teams that they already had to play against. And, to play Texas at Texas, Gregory Gym, that is a real home court advantage. In my multitasking, I was shooting photos as well as the live blog and takeaways and all that. And, when you're shooting photos, you're on that sideline. And, it was hard. It was a challenge, like home court or away court disadvantage for the photographer, just focusing with the students literally right on top of you. Now imagine playing volleyball on that. So, going back to, that's a very long way around to your original question. Their ability to stay in system with really good passing really, I think, was the starting point for what was just an exceptional 2 matches of all around volleyball, really beautiful volleyball. That I think, whether somebody's a Wisconsin fan or not, I think they got traded to some really, really good volleyball down there in Austin.
So you wrote about this at jsonline.com. If this team has a chance to keep going, certainly you can't put too much past them. Kentucky, though, is a little bit of a different animal, and as we said, Nebraska was undefeated going into the Elite Eight, and they got shocked. I did not think Nebraska was in danger of coming close to losing this national championship. They were getting every single vote in the AVCA poll for the number 1 team in the country. It was a clear cut number 1 team in the nation, and they get shocked by Texas A&M. So they're done, and that opens the field up quite a bit. Now, Kentucky is still very, very good. Pittsburgh on the other side, they'll be playing Texas A&M. That's a very, very good team as well. So it's going to still be an uphill battle. Wisconsin basically has to replicate what it just did in beating two teams ranked ahead of it to win the national championship. They will not be seen as the favorites, but the way they played in Austin, how can you put it past them? So do you still feel, John, like you did going into Austin, like, well, I mean, anything can happen, but like, it's going to require some magic? Or do you feel like, you know what, I've seen enough. Wisconsin, full strength, playing at its best, they could absolutely win the national title?
I don't want to go out here and declare, okay, they're going to win it all because, okay, it's me. Oh, there's the Wisconsin writer being the homer. And you do have to go up against two exceptionally good teams. But I'm not ruling anything out with this Wisconsin team. The way that they went in and beat Texas, I think that is as much of a challenge as you can possibly face in this tournament. And you look at it, as I was mentioning before about just how much of a home court advantage Texas has there. That was an exceptionally good environment there. Wisconsin benefits from a very good home court advantage at the Fieldhouse. They went up against one in Texas, and just how talented Texas is in so many ways. I think that's as much of a challenge as Wisconsin can face, and they passed that with flying colors. I don't think, okay, I guess they could have won in 3 sets instead of 4 if we're being all technical about it. But I don't think anybody thought that Texas would, get swept. That would just be, So, to beat Texas in 4 sets the way that they did, to beat Stanford in 4 sets the way that they did, I wouldn't rule anything out. And, but they still have to beat Kentucky, which obviously was outstanding throughout SEC play. And we've seen just how good the SEC is when you look at a team like Texas A&M, shocking Nebraska. So, you still have to beat them. You still have to beat either Pitt or Texas A&M. And I don't think there's either one of those that I would say, oh man, I'd rather face that one versus that one. Obviously, if Nebraska had won, you would have said, okay, you don't want to go up against Nebraska. But I don't think any of these 3 teams are pushovers going ahead in Kansas City. So I think we're going to be treated to some very good volleyball again in Kansas City.
Ava Hudson, the Badgers know her from her time at Purdue. She is Kentucky's star. She's also a finalist for the National Player of the Year. That's a name we're going to hear a lot on the broadcast. You've seen enough volleyball. I wonder if you can sort of give a tutorial on what it is when a setter like Charlie Fuerbringer, what makes her different from these other elite setters. There's clearly something. I mean, it's not hard to figure out that when she's back, the Badgers are a different volleyball team. 3 of their 4 losses came with Charlie injured. So like it's clear that she has something. She was a very decorated recruit coming into the program from California. I know people were really excited to get her on the court. She started, of course, as a freshman. What makes her special? It's hard, I think, for the average person like me to look at setters and say, well, that setter is different than these other, Division I setters. What is it about her?
Yeah, well, kind of to take a step back, the analogy that you often hear with setters in volleyball is they're kind of the quarterbacks of the volleyball court. Is they are really the one orchestrating the offense. Whether you want to use quarterback of volleyball, the point guard of volleyball, that really is their job. And I think part of what makes Charlie so good is her ability to just make really difficult things look easy. And, she has set up, there were a couple of, Mimi kills that I remember, being on press row and thinking, wow, she made that look easy. But it's because she got the perfect ball on the perfect read from Charlie. So the way that she's able to, set up Mimi, set up the middles, her court vision is fantastic. She can throw in a good dump there, like a lot of the top setters can do as well. But just, the feel that she has for it, and she's the daughter of volleyball coaches. So, it's not a surprise that, she has that really high volleyball IQ. She does play with, so much joy too. I think you probably saw a little bit with some of those celebrations after points. And, it's interesting, yes, she's the daughter of coaches, but it's never something really forced upon her, which was an interesting thing to talk to her about earlier in the season. But that's beside the point what she does on the court. It's just how effortless she can really run this offense and really set up anybody, whether it's Mimi Colyer, both in front row and back row. Mimi Colyer is not in contention for the awards that she's in contention for if she wasn't such a great back row attacker. And, a lot of credit goes to Mimi herself on that, because that is really tough to do, but also Charlie has set her up well. So yeah, if you're looking for something in the box score, I would say just look at how many different people can be threats. Obviously, Wisconsin has that number one star with Mimi, but look at what, how the middles are set up. How Grace Egan is set up, how Una is set up. And that just goes to show how good Charlie is. And sometimes the best setting jobs, you don't even really notice the setter a ton. And I think you could probably say that about some of these recent matches.
Yeah, she had 23 kills, Mimi Colyer did in that match. I don't even know if she had to be set in the back row that often based on what I was seeing. Like Charlie was able to use her front row so effectively. Yeah, everybody had amazing. I mean, like Una hit 458, Carter Booth hit 389, Mimi 309. Like those are Grace Egan 250 even. Those are amazing numbers for your four primary attackers against, again, we're talking about one of the best teams in the country in Texas, a team that had beaten them earlier this season at full strength. So just a sensational performance all the way around. What else do we need to know, John Steppe, about this volleyball team? Again, people are checking in for the first time. They're turning on their TVs Thursday night. Maybe they'll watch a little of that Pitt Texas A&M match. They're about to take their annual crash course on Wisconsin volleyball. What else do we need to know?
Yeah, it's a team that has played with a lot of joy. Kelly Sheffield has really said throughout the season that, this is a team that, I'm paraphrasing here, but this is a team that people are going to enjoy watching grow. And they really have grown. You see how much they grew from August 31st when Texas comes into the Kohl Center for opening Spike Classic and sweeps Wisconsin, to then, what we just saw in the Elite Eight or regional finals. But, everyone's thinking that is Elite Eight. So, it's a team that's grown. It's a team that has relied on different people. You were mentioning Trinity as somebody who, she's somebody that injuries have, been a challenge at points for her. But, the way that she's been able to contribute as a reserve has been kind of another really great storyline here. You were mentioning Madison Quest, the very talented freshman.
Yeah, I said she was a sophomore last year, or was with the program last year, but she is a freshman.
Yeah, freshman, daughter of a former player, and came in and played a lot when Grace Egan was out. That's another thing where this team has overcome some adversity. It hasn't always come easy for this team, but they have a lot of fun together. I remember, I was at the selection show, at the, their watch party for the selection show, and just the amount of joy that they had, not just when, everybody sees the, oh, yay, okay, we're the, number 3 seed in the Texas regional, but just throughout, that whole watch party, the amount of joy that they play with is a lot of fun to watch. So yeah, this is a team that, I think has inspired a lot of people. And they have an opportunity to inspire some more people now that a lot of people kind of catch up on, what this team can do. And, I guess another interesting thing, they have, like, obviously we've talked about Kristen Simon as a freshman. We've talked about Madison Quest. Off the court, Anaya Warren, the other person that is competing for opportunities at libero. And we've seen her come in as a defensive specialist at times. Not as much, recently, but we have seen that during the season. She wrote a children's book. That was a really fun story to read.
Cool.
So if you're trying to get to know what some of these players are like off the court, I'm sure if you Google Anaya Warren JS Online children's book, you can find that article, and that was a fun one to write.
Yeah, Pauline Bresky is the mom, as you mentioned, former Wisconsin Badgers player. Carter Booth, she's the daughter of Calvin Booth, the basketball player as well.
Yeah.
There we go.
So Calvin has been at some of these matches. So I was shooting photos, I think, right in front of him.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and Carter Booth is somebody that has really moved around a lot growing up because of Calvin's career being in different places. So she didn't really necessarily have the chance in some of these places to really form roots. But she's really formed roots in Madison. And it's been a very good volleyball home for her. And that was fun to talk to her about because that's not necessarily an easy lifestyle there. But she's grown as a leader. They needed her to be a more vocal leader on this team. When you think about, you were mentioning earlier, all the kind of household names who graduated last year, and they needed people to step up as leaders. And the way that Carter has stepped up as a leader, the way that Charlie Fuerbringer has stepped up as a leader has been really cool to see. So yeah, definitely some athletic pedigree there in the Booth family. But the other fun thing is you don't realize it as much when you're around this team as much as they are, but it's fun seeing the reactions of people who are just now discovering this team. Like there was a former colleague at another paper that I used to work at, that is a big Texas volleyball fan. And she was like, wow, Wisconsin's middle is so good. And you could have had 6 different people that you could have inserted that name into in that last match. So it's been fun to see kind of everyone else discover this team that I've been fortunate to be able to cover throughout the season.
Carter Booth, one of those middles, of course, if not the middle that she's referring to, her numbers skyrocketed this year. She was transfer. She's I know there's a lot of consternation in the Badger football program, for example, of all these Wisconsin kids choosing Minnesota. Well, she was at Minnesota and she came here with some, was a pretty decorated player, came here in 2023, had some great numbers, took a big step back statistically last year. And then this season has, a 454 hitting percentage. Middle blocker has higher percentage than what you might expect from an outside hitter by a lot, but that is a tremendous number. More than 2 kills per set. She's been very special. And like you said, the leadership piece, you could see what, if you watch any press conferences or see her talk, she's the elder statesman here. She's been here 3 seasons. That's a long time in college football or college athletics at this point. So she's looking to go out on a high note here in the Final Four. So again, that game is Thursday night against Kentucky. John, my parents they live outside of Lexington, Kentucky. They are Kentucky fans. They attend a number of games at Rupp Arena for the men's basketball team. They've been there for 20 years. This definitely came up in 2014 and 2015 when the men's basketball team squared off in the Final Four. So we get it again. It's a Radcliffe family civil war where Kentucky takes on Wisconsin. I did mention the football team. I want to leave on that note just real quickly. Christian Alliegro announcing that he is transferring from the program. Again, we haven't hit yet that window where we start getting transfers funneling in, at least from other FBS programs. So right now it's just bad news, I guess. Wisconsin players leaving the program. And Christian Alliegro obviously was a pretty big contributor on defense. I know when that, he's a linebacker. It's easy to say, well, they got Cooper Catalano and Mason Posa. That's what we said about other guys, including Tackett Curtis, linebackers who've left the program. But there was Christian Alliegro was going to play. There was plenty of opportunity for him to play and continue to shine as he has done so far. He's one of those rare guys that the Badgers recruited and brought in, and they've seen him develop into somebody who, there aren't many guys like that anymore. So I guess I was a little bummed to see that. I know. I mean, it's always Catalano and Posa are kind of the frontline guys that are now the fabric of that defense, and I get that. I just feel like there would have been room for Alliegro to shine as well. So, what is your thought about him leaving?
Yeah, it's definitely a blow because, as you said, that would have been a really good trio if you had Catalano, Posa, and Allegro as your three linebackers. And, linebacker is going to be a position of need now for this team. They've lost a lot of their depth too at this linebacker position. So, that's the main area that, when the portal opens, it's becoming a position of need. Obviously, number one position of need is quarterback. That was abundantly obvious throughout this season that they're going to need some help there. But linebacker is getting higher up on that list than you would have said. I think Allegro is really a guy that they would have really liked to retain. So I think it's a little bit of a blow from that standpoint too, in terms of, when you're losing the guys that you really want to keep. That's a tough blow there. So, they've got some work to do. They have a little bit of staff turnover too. So, anytime that you're losing anybody in kind of those player personnel roles, this is not the time that you want to be lightly staffed when player retention is such a key aspect of it. And I think a lot of the teams that I've covered, whether it's here or on past beats that have succeeded, have retained their best players. Obviously basketball, people aren't super high on right now after that Nebraska loss. But, when basketball has been doing well, everyone credits the ability to retain John Blackwell and Nolan Winter. Wisconsin, it's been a really important month here on the football front in terms of, retaining the Winters and Blackwells of the football world. And losing Allegro is certainly one blow to it. Obviously, they have had other key retentions already, but it's certainly going to be something to watch in this next month.
He is John Steppe. Find everything he has at jsonline.com. He's getting on an airplane to Kansas City. I bet you didn't think that was going to be happening. Bet you thought you'd be watching Wisconsin-Villanova on Friday, and instead you are off to watch some Final Four volleyball. Wisconsin will get things going Thursday night. They'll face off with Kentucky. John, thank you for joining us, man. We will chat with you again very soon.
Thank you. Looking forward to it, and looking forward to procrastinating on packing a little bit longer.
Yes, that's one of those things that just never actually gets done. There will be boxes that live there forever. Hit us up on, to help us grow this podcast. It's obviously pretty early in our relaunch. Definitely could use all the publicity it can get. Rate us and review us as you find Terrace View, the Wisconsin Badgers podcast from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Those are two very popular places. Check that out. Let us know what you think. Feel free to email us here and reach out to us on social media. Let us know if you like what you're hearing. We'll talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye, everybody.